Alrighty, so we are a couple of weeks into both the college football and NFL season, so things very, very slowly start to take shape. But again, I emphasize this is a long process, and we've got a long road to hoe. And believe me, the only thing that is going to be constant in terms of my mock drafts, prospect rankings, big boards, all of that is going to be change. A lot will change here. And especially with some of these early season mocks, it is much about name recognition and thinking about things that could happen as much as it is anything else. So don't put too much stock into it. Don't get all angry or butthurt when you see your team's picking in a certain spot, because ultimately all I did to determine the draft order was say, hey, the Jets are 0-2. I put them at number 1. The 49ers were 0-2 when I did the mock draft. They're 0-3 now. I put them at number 2. Jets at number 1, 49ers number 2. The Browns are 0-2. I put them at number 3. You get the idea? All right, so don't think of it as any major indictment on your team. And frankly, I don't give a crap anyways. But a lot is going to change, and a lot will still yet to be determined. In terms of my very, very, very preliminary and early assessment of the 2018 draft class, and believe me, the only thing that is more varied than the early part is the preliminary part, in terms of a lot of players to watch, a lot of games to watch, a lot of film to watch, a lot of cut-ups to watch, a lot of stuff to watch before I start hanging my hat on certain guys or certain things or certain hot takes about the draft or prospects or teams taking guys wherever. So keep that in mind. But here are my early impressions. The wide receiver class has quite a bit of round one talent. I think the running back class, while not as great as what I think is going to end up being a historically good 2017 draft class, has some really good talent, led by a guy that preliminarily right now is my number 1 player in the draft, that is Saquon Barkley from Penn State. But there are other guys like guys from LSU, Jones from USC, Nick Chubb from Georgia. It's a good running back class. The offensive line class is much better this time around, even with a guy like Connor Williams tearing his meniscus and potentially being out for the year. There are still other guys, and even Williams I still think will end up being a first-round pick. It's a much better class for tackles this year and offensive linemen in general than it was this past year, that's for sure. Defensively, I think you've got some studs in the mix, and some of the early studs that stand out to me potentially are guys like Bradley Chubb and Derwin James and Dorance Armstrong Jr., the edge rusher from Kansas. But with that said, a lot of way to go here, and a lot of that could probably change. But in general, right now, when I look at it, I think the linebacker class is a little bit better than it has been in some recent years. The defensive line, like especially if you're running 3-4 fronts, I think it's a pretty good class for that. But I don't know if it's the best class for edge rushers. I don't think it's the best class for the secondary. But again, a lot could change. But ultimately, all that crap is going to ultimately kick rocks, because this draft class will be thought of in large part based off of the strengths or weaknesses of the quarterback class. Because you have a lot of big names, a lot of names that people have been buzzing about and hyping about and hyped up about. And it's ultimately going to come down to what these guys are and what these guys prove themselves to be throughout the 2017 college football season. You start off with Sam Darnold. Right now, I've got him going number 1 overall to the Jets. There's a part of me that wonders, is Sam Darnold going to look at it and say, hey, I could play for this professional college organization in Los Angeles at USC and avoid having to go to the Jets, go back to school in 2018, play another year, risk teams getting another year on film on me, which could potentially mean that they'll find more things to poke holes in my game about. It could potentially drop my draft stock a little bit. But is it really worth being number 1 overall if it means I have to go to the crappy-ass Jets organization? Or do I say if I've got a chance to be number 1 overall, I have to go because might only have one chance to be number 1 overall? It's a really interesting question. It's a similar question Peyton Manning faced over 20 years ago, and while they're different prospects, Darnold doesn't quite look the part compared to Peyton Manning in terms of the traditional pocket passer. He doesn't have the arm that Peyton Manning did. Sam Darnold is more mobile. I think he's got some of the same intangibles as Peyton, especially with Peyton coming out of Tennessee. Well, Peyton Manning once had to make that choice, and he decided to go back to Tennessee for his senior year, and it ultimately worked out for him. Instead of potentially being taken number 1 overall by the Jets in that 97 draft, to where he would have went to Bill Parcells, who would have spent so much time tearing him down that it might have rocked Peyton Manning's world, frankly. He went the next year to Indianapolis, where he got a chance to play right away, and he got to learn from his mistakes, and he made a lot of them as a rookie with 26 interceptions. Sam Darnold will face potentially a similar decision. I think some teams are going to have a little bit of concern because he doesn't have that big-time franchise size. He doesn't have the big-time gunslinger type of arm. But you watch him and you just feel like, in theory, this guy should be something. But you have the concern of, is he a John David Booty? Is he a Matt Leinart? Or is he a big-time quarterback at the NFL level that you could build a franchise around and win a championship with? I think right now enough teams are going to fall in love with the intangibles, the leadership, the mobility, and some other things, the big playability, some of the clutch factor that he has, and they're going to value him very, very highly. When I look at Mason Rudolph, here's a guy that right now with Oklahoma State, his draft stock, I believe, is climbing because some of the issues he had to work on in terms of accuracy, in terms of decision-making, in terms of the ability to go through progressions, even though it's still early in the year and he hasn't faced the best level of competition, I have seen growth, improvement, and progression in those areas. Even though he's not the most mobile guy, I think he's even got a little bit better in terms of his ability to move. Not great. It's not going to be a hallmark of his career, but he's not a total slouch in the pocket as he maybe was 2 years ago. I look at Mason Rudolph, and I see a guy whose draft stock is climbing, but our team's going to be concerned about the lack of mobility. Are some teams not going to like the way he delivers the football? Are they going to question his arm strength? I don't know yet. You look at Josh Rosen, I think he's going to be one of those really polarizing prospects. Depending on who you listen to when it comes to NFL media and NFL draft media, Josh Rosen's either really, really high up or he's not so high up. I tend to believe right now it's a little bit more on the not as high up as the media is going to make him out to be. Teams are going to question his arm. Teams are going to question, sometimes the fact that it seems like he doesn't show up until later on in the game. There's going to be some questions off the field in terms of leadership and maturity and so forth. Not the best athlete, not the most mobile guy. So while I've got him going 12 here to Washington, it would not be surprising to me that if he's one of those quarterbacks that drops into the 20s or drops outside of the first round entirely. I'm just saying. Josh Allen's been really frustrating for me to watch because at this time he's still the number one quarterback on my board. But truth is what the truth is, and the truth is the 2 games he's played this year against Oregon and Iowa, he has sucked. Part of that could come into not having Tanner Gentry and Jacob Hollister there as options in the passing game, but he has just sucked. And it's be really concerning for an NFL team to see a guy with this much talent play so poorly against bigger schools that aren't even that great defensively themselves, because if he can't have handled the jump in competition to face Oregon and Iowa at the college level, how the hell is he going to square off against some of the top flight defenses in the NFL? But there's a lot to be excited about, a lot of frustration too in watching his game, but he's still at this point in time to me a first round talent. And Jacksonville at 15, if he's there, you would have to gamble on him. And then Lamar Jackson, he's a guy that I want him to get drafted higher. I want to buy into him more. I want to believe in him more. But I frankly need to see more of him and see more out of him to be fully bought in that he can be that type of guy at the NFL level. With that said, he's an incredible athlete. He's got a strong arm. I think when he's right, he's more accurate, and he's a better decision maker than he's going to get credit for. He's going to get some knocks about processing, game speed, and this and that. And some of that has certain reasons that we know about, and some of it is valid. But I think you have seen some progression as a passer. I don't know how much, but it remains to be seen. But it's those guys, along with the Jared Stidhams and so many other guys that I don't have in round 1 here. There are a lot of names at the quarterback position this year. Are they those type of guys, or are they just names at this point? We still have a lot of season to go in order to find out. But you can check out my 1-round mock. It is in the description box below. You can give me your thoughts, your comments, your questions. Hit me up on Twitter at @TheJeffSchlegel is the Twitter handle. I'll be back again after week 4 or so with another mock draft, and we'll continue that jam every 2 weeks or so until we get to the end of the NFL season.